The night the janitor pulled the fire alarm had not been a special night at all. It was the kind of late, quiet, unremarkable evening when a school turns into a hollow shell of itself. Hallways humming with fluorescent light, lockers standing like mute sentinels, classrooms emptied of every trace of daytime energy. And yet in that silence, something waited, something watched. Miles Carter never believed the school was haunted, but that night, as he wheeled his cleaning cart through the dim corridor outside the science wing, he felt the strange pressure of a presence behind him, light enough to dismiss, heavy enough to make his skin prickle. Miles paused. The corridor remained perfectly still. No footsteps, no doors, just the faint ticking of the old clock near the cafeteria. He exhaled, shook off the feeling, and continued, his mop sloshing quietly against the worn linoleum floor. It was only when he reached the end of the hall and bent down to pick up what he assumed was a dropped toy or piece of scrap metal that the world around him changed. The object was small, metallic, and oddly cold, colder than anything should have been indoors. It looked like a child's trinket, no bigger than a keychain, yet the moment his fingers closed around it, it emitted a soft pulse. Not a sound, a pulse, like a heartbeat made of static. Miles froze. Then the pulse came again. He held it up to the light, no moving parts, no buttons, no seams, just a tiny, perfectly smooth device that reflected the ceiling lights in a distorted, oily sheen. Suddenly, a piercing click echoed down the hallway. Not mechanical, not electrical. It sounded almost, deliberate. Miles' instincts overrode his curiosity. He reached for the nearest wall-mounted fire alarm and yanked it. The shrill wail erupted instantly, flooding the school with chaotic noise. His heart slammed against his ribs. Something was wrong. He didn't know what, but he felt danger closing in, like invisible hands tightening around the air. When police arrived, Miles expected the usual questioning: why the alarm was pulled, what he thought he saw, whether there was an actual emergency. But instead of the local officers, two unmarked government sedans pulled up. 4 men stepped out, stern, silent, their shoes polished to a mirror shine. And the first thing they asked was not about the alarm. It was, where is the device? To understand why 4 government men arrived at a quiet public school in the middle of the night, men who moved with a discipline far beyond that of local law enforcement, one must step back into the world that created them. A world defined by suspicion, shadow wars, and the quiet terror of secrets more dangerous than weapons. A world where a janitor's accidental discovery could ignite an international crisis. The Cold War was never truly cold. It was a fever simmering across continents, rising and falling with the political tides. 2 superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, stood locked in a silent duel, each convinced the other was plotting a decisive strike. Tanks didn't roll across borders. Missiles didn't launch. Yet every movement, every innovation, every whispered rumor carried the weight of potential catastrophe. Because the real battleground was not land. It was information. In those tense decades, intelligence agencies on both sides constructed intricate networks of spies, informants, double agents, and shadow operatives. Files were guarded like lives. Secrets were currency. And the most dangerous threats often wore the most ordinary disguises: teachers, shopkeepers, postal carriers, and yes, school staff. By the time Miles Carter found the strange object on the hallway floor, espionage technology had evolved far beyond coded letters and hidden microfilm. Miniature transmitters, disguised bugs, fiber optic microphones, pen-sized cameras. These were tools of a vast, invisible war. Devices were smuggled across borders, tucked inside everyday belongings: hairbrushes, toys, batteries, even religious icons. Each item had potential for mischief, manipulation, or surveillance. In certain regions of the country, even seemingly insignificant institutions, public schools, community centers, local radio stations, were quietly swept into the web of espionage, not because they were political, but because they were perfect hiding places, perfect environments for passing messages unnoticed, perfect staging grounds for covert drops. During this period, intelligence agencies monitored not only foreign diplomats, but also each other. Friendly nations spied on friends. Allies double-crossed allies. Every government feared infiltration, internal betrayal, or sleeper agents buried deep within ordinary life. And schools, believed to be innocent, routine, predictable, were ideal covers. Of course, Miles knew none of this. To him, it was simply a school, a place of chalk dust, forgotten textbooks, and scuffed hallways. A place where rumors were about students cheating on exams, not foreign operatives slipping encoded data into ventilation ducts. But the men who arrived after the fire alarm knew exactly what they were dealing with. They recognized the signature of the object he had found. They had seen similar devices before, though rarely in such unexpected locations, and each time they encountered one, it meant something alarming. Someone had set up a covert listening post. Someone had planted a recording tool designed to blend effortlessly into daily life. Someone had breached the networks of trust that kept the fragile balance of global tensions intact. Even more concerning was how the device had ended up in the school corridor. These tools were never meant to be left lying around. They were carefully placed, strategically hidden, and retrieved at precise intervals. If this one had fallen, something had gone wrong. Either the operative had been interrupted, or there was an internal leak. Government agencies lived in constant fear of leaks. A single misplaced device could unravel an entire operation. A single compromised agent could trigger retaliation halfway across the globe. So when Miles triggered the alarm, his action did not simply summon emergency responders. It tripped a silent wire in the machinery of the Cold War. A wire that many had hoped would never be touched. A wire that connected a quiet school hallway to a vast, dangerous world of secrets that no one was supposed to uncover. Miles Carter had always considered himself an unremarkable man, ordinary to the point of invisibility, and in many ways, he preferred it that way. He was the kind of person who moved quietly through the world, never drawing attention, never stirring conflict, never raising his voice above the hum of polite conversation. If there was a path that avoided trouble entirely, Miles took it without hesitation. At 47, he had settled into a life defined less by ambition and more by routine. His job as the school janitor wasn't glamorous, but it offered something he valued deeply: stability. The halls were predictable, the classrooms familiar, the schedule unchanging. Every day followed a rhythm he could depend on, and for Miles, predictability was safety. He lived alone in a modest apartment on the second floor of a brick building overlooking a grocery store parking lot. His neighbors were mostly elderly retirees who kept to themselves, leaving Miles to enjoy the quiet. He spent evenings eating canned soup while listening to local radio or flipping through old detective novels he'd collected over the years. He liked puzzles, mysteries, and stories about clever investigators catching criminals through logic and observation. But never once did he imagine he might encounter anything remotely like that in his own life. Miles had been married once, briefly. His ex-wife, Emily, left him more than a decade earlier, frustrated by his inability to take risks or step forward, as she described it. She claimed he was too afraid of the world to live in it fully. Miles never agreed with her assessment, though he couldn't deny that he found comfort in simplicity, danger, unpredictability, confrontation. These were things he avoided, not out of fear, but because they felt unnecessary. Life was easier without complications. But beneath that calm exterior, there was something deeper, an unspoken loneliness he rarely acknowledged. He cared for others more than people realized, observing small details with quiet tenderness. The way kids dragged their backpacks on Friday afternoons, the tired smile of the math teacher who always forgot her lunch, the custodian next door who whistled old jazz tunes during the early shift. Miles saw the world closely, intimately, even if he rarely spoke about it. Still, he never imagined anyone would notice him. His co-workers barely registered his presence. Students passed by without a second glance, occasionally greeting him out of politeness, but otherwise focused on their own lives. And the school administration viewed him as a dependable fixture, someone who disappeared into the background, yet ensured everything functioned smoothly. Miles was fine with being overlooked. Invisible people rarely attract trouble. But he had vulnerabilities, quiet ones. A lingering insecurity about being ordinary, a suppressed resentment toward a world that moved faster than he could keep up with, a persistent fear that he lived a life easily forgotten. These emotions hid beneath layers of routine, like dust swept under the lockers he cleaned nightly. He also carried a subtle anxiety, one born from childhood, when he'd grown up in a house where sudden noises meant arguments were about to erupt. Even now, as an adult, loud sounds or unexpected disruptions made his heart jump. This was why that night, when he heard the sharp click echoing down the hallway, something old and primal awakened in him. Something instinctive, something that told him, this is dangerous. His past offered him little preparation for what would follow. Miles had never held a weapon, never traveled outside the country, never interacted with anyone more secretive than a shy student trying to hide a failing grade. He did not understand espionage. He did not follow international news, and he certainly didn't know how intelligence agencies operated or how they responded when one of their most sensitive tools was discovered by someone who was never supposed to see it. But, in a way, his ordinary nature made him the perfect person to stumble upon a secret. Spies carefully watched those in positions of influence, but no one monitored the janitor who emptied wastebaskets. No one suspected the quiet man with a mop and a keyring of doors he unlocked nightly. Miles Carter never wanted to be part of something bigger, darker, or more dangerous than the mundane routine of his life. Yet the moment he picked up that strange device, cold, pulsing, impossibly out of place, his world shifted, though he didn't yet understand how dramatically. He didn't know that the object in his hand connected to an intelligence network spanning oceans and borders. He didn't know that his name was already being radioed to distant command centers. And he didn't know that soon, people he had never met would decide whether he was an asset or a threat. For the first 2 days after the incident, Miles tried to convince himself that nothing unusual had happened. The school reopened, the alarms were reset, life went on. Students returned with backpacks slung over their shoulders, chattering about homework and cafeteria food. Teachers graded papers, bells rang, and the halls returned to their familiar rhythm. But something had changed, subtly at first. The men who questioned him that night had given no explanation, not about the device, not about why they arrived so quickly, not even why they took the object without logging it into any official report. They had thanked him with strained politeness, shaken his hand, and disappeared into the darkness. No badge numbers, no paperwork. Nothing tangible to prove they had been there at all. Still, Miles felt their presence lingering like a faint shadow. Their eyes, sharp and scanning, had assessed him not as a witness, but as a variable. Something unpredictable, something to be monitored. He didn't know why, but he felt it. On the third night, the school felt different. He noticed it first in the front office. A metal cabinet he knew always squeaked now opened smoothly. The papers inside were too neatly arranged, as if someone had gone through them and put everything back with surgical precision. The receptionist's drawer, usually cluttered with pens and gum wrappers, was neatly aligned. Even the staples in the corner were perfectly squared. Someone had been searching for something, and they were careful. Miles tried to shake it off as overthinking, but the feeling didn't leave him. Later that night, while cleaning the hallway outside the library, he saw a faint reflection in the glass panel of the trophy case. A figure, tall, still, partially hidden by the shadows of the adjacent hallway, was watching him, not moving, not speaking. Miles turned around quickly. The hallway was empty, but the unease clung to him like cold fog. He pushed his cart toward the gymnasium. His footsteps seemed louder than usual, echoing strangely off the walls. The air felt heavier, almost metallic, carrying a scent he couldn't place, like ozone after a storm. He tried to dismiss it as the lingering anxiety of that night. Then he saw it. A door near the science lab, one that was always locked, one used only for storage, was slightly ajar. Miles stopped. He knew every door in the building. He knew their quirks, their hinges, their locks, and he knew that this one never opened without his key. Heart pounding, he approached cautiously, pushing it open with the tip of his mop handle. The room was dark, silent. Shelves of old equipment lined the walls, microscopes, outdated projectors, broken beakers. Nothing unusual, except for one thing. A faint outline on the dusty floor where a large object had recently been moved, a rectangular shape, perhaps a case. The dust displaced suggested it had been dragged out not long ago. Miles knelt and examined the floor. Fresh footprints overlapped his own old ones, not from students, not from staff. He recognized the tread pattern, military or tactical boots. His skin prickled. He backed out of the room, closed the door, and heard, faintly, the creak of movement down the far end of the hall. He wasn't alone. Miles's instinct screamed at him to leave, but he forced himself to breathe steadily. He walked toward the exit, trying to appear calm. At the end of the hallway, he glanced over his shoulder and saw a silhouette slipping out of sight behind the stairwell, taller than any student, heavier, purposeful. Someone was watching him, and they didn't want to be seen. That night, at home, the feeling didn't leave him. When he locked his door, he noticed a small piece of lint caught in the deadbolt, something that hadn't been there before. He checked his windows and found the slightest misalignment in the latch, as if it had been opened and carefully closed again. Miles sat in his small kitchen, hands trembling over a bowl of canned soup he had no appetite for. The silence in the apartment was overwhelming. His radio crackled softly on the counter, static, then a faint buzz, then silence again. He had never been a paranoid man. But paranoia, he realized, was not always irrational. Sometimes it was the mind's way of detecting what the eyes could not yet prove. Someone had entered his space. Someone wanted something from him. Someone believed he knew more than he did. And beneath that growing fear, one thought echoed louder than the rest. The night he found the device wasn't the beginning of the danger. It was the moment he stepped into something already in motion. The morning after his uneasy night, Miles arrived at the school earlier than usual, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't sleep. Every sound in his apartment had kept him awake, the elevator cables groaning, a neighbor's muffled cough, the wind brushing against the thin window frame. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the strange events, until they twisted into a knot he could no longer ignore. By 5:30 a.m., he was standing at the school's entrance, the sky still a deep shade of blue. The building seemed calm, but there was a tension beneath the stillness, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. He decided to investigate, not out of bravery, not even out of curiosity, but because the alternative, remaining ignorant, felt far more dangerous now. He started in the science wing, retracing the hallway where he first found the object. The janitor's closet smelled of cleaning solution and old rags, but something new lingered underneath, the faint scent of cigarette smoke. No one smoked inside the school. It was a strict rule, yet an ash pile sat near the drains, swept roughly into a corner, still warm. Someone had been here recently. Miles's pulse quickened. He pushed his anxiety aside and began checking closets, storage rooms, even the basement maintenance tunnels. He noticed details he'd never bothered examining before: scratches on a door hinge, a removed ceiling tile, a light bulb whose filament was warm despite the switch being off. Someone was moving through the school at night. He was now certain. At 7:10 a.m., as staff began arriving, Miles walked past the front office and saw a man he didn't recognize speaking quietly with the principal. The man wore a simple gray suit, too plain to attract attention, too sharp to be ordinary. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, Miles felt the weight of a silent assessment. Not curiosity, not politeness, evaluation. The man nodded once, a gesture too practiced to be polite, then turned away. Miles continued his rounds, but the memory of that look stayed with him. Later that afternoon, in the cafeteria storage room, Miles found something that confirmed his fears: a small black wire, no longer than a finger, tucked behind a stack of unused trays. At first, he thought it was just electrical scrap, until he noticed the tip sharpened to an angled point where a microphone diaphragm would typically be. Someone was bugging the school. A chill ran down his spine. That same evening, long after the last teacher had left, Miles made his boldest decision yet. Instead of following his cleaning route, he slipped into the administrative wing, a place typically off-limits to him. He used an old brass key the previous janitor had given him years ago, a key meant for emergencies only. The lock turned with a soft click. Inside the principal's office, he scanned the room in the dark. A desk lamp cast a low circle of light across stacks of papers. Diplomas hung on the walls. Everything seemed normal until he noticed a drawer slightly open, just enough to reveal a corner of something metallic. He slid the drawer open fully. A small gray case lay inside. It was almost identical in size to the outline he'd seen in the dusty storage room 2 nights earlier. Carefully, Miles opened it. Inside were 3 items. A folded map of the school, marked with tiny red X's in rooms Miles knew were rarely used. A small roll of parchment-like paper, printed with columns of numbers arranged in sequences he didn't recognize. A second device, cold and metallic, just like the one he had found, except this one had a tiny switch on its underside. Miles's breath caught. He reached out and touched the device. A soft, static pulse ran through his fingertips, the same pulse he had felt that night. He closed the case, heart pounding, and returned it to the drawer exactly as he had found it. Some force, experience, instinct, fear told him he shouldn't remove anything. Not yet. As he exited the office, he noticed movement in the hallway. A shadow, tall, slow, deliberate. Someone was there. Miles slipped behind the copy machine alcove and held his breath. The figure moved past, broad shoulders, a heavy coat, the same kind of polished shoes the government men wore. The man paused near the principal's door. His hand lightly touched the doorknob. He listened. Then, without entering, he walked away. Miles waited a full minute before emerging, adrenaline flooding his limbs. He knew now, with chilling clarity, that the school was part of a larger operation, one involving surveillance, coded messages, secret devices, and men who moved like ghosts. He had stepped into their world, and they knew it. The night after discovering the case in the principal's desk, Miles could no longer maintain the illusion that he was merely an accidental witness. Something had been unfolding around him long before he found that metallic device. Someone had chosen the school, his school, as a staging ground for an operation he couldn't yet understand. And that meant one terrifying thing. If he had noticed them, they had noticed him. He returned to work the following evening with a mixture of dread and determination. The thought of being watched gnawed at him. Every footstep seemed to echo too loudly. Every shadow looked deeper than it should. He moved through the hallways carefully, listening, sensing. Then he remembered a detail he'd overlooked. The map he found in the case, the red X's. There were 6 X's on that map, each marking a distinct room: the storage closet by the library, an unused music practice room, the far corner of the gymnasium, a ventilation access above the cafeteria, a janitor's chute door behind the auditorium stage, and a small, forgotten office near the boiler room. Miles had keys to all of them. If these rooms were important enough to be marked, then whatever this operation was, its heart would be hidden in one of them. He started with the music room. As expected, nothing appeared unusual. Dust-covered stands, out-of-tune instruments, a broken metronome. But a closer examination revealed a thin scratch on the floor, almost imperceptible, leading from the door to the back cabinet. Inside the cabinet, he found sheet music that had been shuffled recently. Fingerprints on the glossy covers, smudges on the edges. People had been here, but there was no device. Next, he checked the ventilation access above the cafeteria. He pulled himself up with effort, feeling the cold metal beneath his hands. The vent cover had fresh tool marks. Someone had opened it, but again, nothing remained inside. He circled through the gymnasium, the auditorium, the boiler room, each revealing faint evidence of intrusion, but no concrete clues. Whoever had used these spaces had already cleared them out. All except one: the storage closet behind the library. This closet was different from the others. It was quiet, insulated from hallway noise. Its light switch had a slight delay, 3 seconds before the bulb warmed to life. And when Miles turned the key, he felt the resistance of a lock that had been opened and relocked many, many times. Inside, everything looked normal. Boxes of outdated textbooks, cleaning supplies, spare desk legs, broken clocks, but something felt off. The air seemed heavier, warmer, as if a machine had been running recently. Miles began examining the shelves one by one, checking behind boxes, lifting stacks of paper. Then, as he moved a large cardboard box filled with old binders, he noticed something strange. The back wall didn't feel like a wall at all. It was hollow. He tapped it gently. A muted echo responded. His pulse quickened. He pressed harder, sliding his hand along the edge, and found a small indentation, barely the size of a coin. He pushed. The panel clicked, and a section of the wall, no bigger than a suitcase, opened outward like a hidden door. Inside was a narrow recess containing a single metal cylinder, about the size of a thermos, matte black, with a narrow red stripe around its center. It looked harmless, almost mundane. But when Miles lifted it, he felt something shift inside. Not loose parts, something heavier, denser, mechanical. A device. Not like the bug he had found earlier. This was different. A cylindrical pressure chamber connected by internal wiring he couldn't see but could feel through the metal casing. A small slit on its underside hinted at an insertion point, maybe for data. The red stripe, upon closer inspection, was actually a thin, transparent band. Behind it, he saw faint glimmers of tiny moving lights, like microscopic sparks. This wasn't a listening device. This was something far more complex. Miles froze, because engraved on the bottom, just barely visible under the light, was a small sequence of numbers. 3, 6, 2, 7. He recognized that pattern. It was part of the numerical sequences printed on the parchment paper he found earlier inside the principal's case. This cylinder was connected to the coded sheet, and the coded sheet was part of a larger structure he hadn't yet uncovered. He set the cylinder down carefully. His hands trembled. Someone had built a listening network or a transmission hub inside the school, and the cylinder was a core component. As he stared at the object, one realization struck him with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just espionage. It was preparation. For what? He didn't know. But the moment he heard footsteps approaching the closet door, slow, measured, and intentional, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just investigating them. They were now coming for him. The footsteps stopped just outside the storage closet. Miles held his breath, the metal cylinder still cradled in his hands. The faint hum inside the device pulsed gently against his palms like a mechanical heartbeat. Whoever was on the other side of the door waited, listening, assessing, not barging in, not shouting his name, just listening. That silence terrified him more than anything. Slowly, Miles placed the cylinder back into the hidden compartment and pushed the wall panel until it clicked shut. He forced his face into an expression of confused innocence and reached for a broom, the closest prop that might explain his presence in the closet. The door opened. A tall man filled the doorway, broad shoulders, dark coat, the same polished government-issued shoes he had seen days earlier. His face was smooth, stern, unreadable. His eyes scanned the room with the precision of someone trained to notice the smallest disturbance. "Working late?" the man asked. His voice carried no warmth, no curiosity, only calculation. Miles swallowed. "Just cleaning, storage gets dusty." The man nodded once, but it wasn't agreement. It was acknowledgement, marking Miles's answer like a data point. Behind the man stood another figure, leaner, wearing thin gloves, despite having no need for them. He watched Miles the way a hawk watches an animal that might bolt at any second. "We've been reviewing last week's alarm incident," the tall man said. "Protocol requires a follow-up." Miles forced a nervous smile. "I already answered everything the night it happened." "Yes," the man replied, "but sometimes answers change." A chill slid down Miles's spine. The gloved man stepped inside and brushed past Miles with deliberate closeness. His eyes scanned the shelves, the floor, the walls. Lingering for a fraction of a second on the subtle outline of the recently opened panel, Miles prayed they wouldn't notice the faint smudge left by his fingers. The tall man gestured toward the hallway. "Walk with us." It wasn't a request. Miles followed them through the dim corridors, feeling like a shadow was pulling him deeper into something irreversible. They walked past classrooms, silent and dark, as if the building itself had become a giant surveillance chamber. Every window reflected fragments of their figures, distorted like ghostly silhouettes. "Have you noticed anything unusual since the alarm?" the tall man asked. Miles hesitated. The truth could implicate him. A lie could expose him. "I thought I saw someone in the hallway one night," he said carefully. "Someone I didn't recognize." "Did they see you?" the man asked sharply. I don't know." The two men exchanged a barely perceptible glance. They led him to the principal's office. Not one light was on. The air inside felt colder than the rest of the building, as if whatever had been hidden here had sucked the warmth out of the room. The gloved man closed the door behind him. Miles's heartbeat thudded in his ears. "Mr. Carter," the tall man said softly, "you understand the importance of loyalty, yes?" Miles nodded, though he wasn't sure what he was agreeing to. "What you encountered that night was part of a sensitive government matter. We need your cooperation, total cooperation." Miles forced out the question he feared asking. Cooperation. With what? To ensure nothing you saw, or think you saw, compromises ongoing security operations. Miles's throat tightened. I'm just a janitor. And that, the man said, is why you're valuable. The gloved man stepped toward Miles. You see things, you're invisible. You move through the building without anyone noticing. Miles felt the blood leave his face. They weren't just monitoring the school, they wanted to use him. Before he could respond, the tall man leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that sliced through the dark. Someone inside this building is working against us. We believe they may have contacted a foreign entity. Miles blinked. A spy? A traitor, the man corrected, and you're going to help us find them. The room seemed to tilt. Miles had stepped into something far more dangerous than hidden devices and strange shadows. He was now part of the hunt, whether he wanted to be or not. For several seconds, Miles could only stare at the two men, trying to process the weight of their words. A traitor? Inside the school? His mind tried to reject it. Teachers, office staff, cafeteria workers. None of them seemed capable of something so calculated, so treacherous. Yet the cold certainty in the agents' voices left no room for doubt. But then everything shifted. Because as the tall man continued speaking, a detail, so small, so invisible days earlier, finally clicked in Miles's mind. A memory buried beneath the anxiety and chaos of the week surfaced with startling clarity. The night he found the device, someone else was in the hallway, not watching him, searching for something. Miles swallowed hard, sudden understanding chilling him to the bone. What if, he said slowly, choosing each word with care, the person you're looking for wasn't here that night to spy, but to retrieve something? Both men turned sharply toward him. The gloved man narrowed his eyes. Retrieve what? Miles hesitated. He had no proof, only instinct. The device I found, it wasn't left behind, it was dropped, accidentally. The tall man took a step forward. Explain. Miles exhaled shakily. I heard a click before I picked it up, not mechanical. More like someone panicking, losing their grip, running. The two men exchanged a look, a real one this time, unguarded. Miles's voice grew steadier. And when I checked all the marked rooms, someone had cleared them out, someone fast, someone careful, someone who knew you'd come. Silence thickened around them. Then the gloved man spoke, low and cutting. Who did you tell about the device? No one, Miles said immediately, I swear. The man studied him for a long moment, too long, before finally looking away. But the tall man wasn't finished. Mr. Carter, he said, his voice now softer, almost regretful, the traitor isn't one of the teachers or the staff. Miles felt the air shift. It's someone who has unrestricted access, the man continued. Someone who can move through the building unnoticed. Someone who can enter rooms without raising suspicion. The words landed like blows. Someone who can move invisibly. Someone who cleans every hallway, every office, every storage room. Someone who was first to find the device, because he was meant to. Miles felt his chest tighten. You think it's me, he whispered. The tall man didn't answer. He didn't have to. The gloved agent stepped behind Miles, the soft scrape of his shoe echoing in the darkness. It wasn't an attack, not yet. But it was a position, strategic, deliberate, trapping. A trap Miles hadn't realized he had walked into. Because the truth slammed into him all at once. They weren't asking him to help find the traitor. They were evaluating whether he was the traitor. This entire conversation, this interrogation, was never about recruitment. It was about determining whether Miles Carter was the man they had been hunting all along. And as the gloved man placed a firm hand on his shoulder, Miles understood an even more terrifying possibility. If he couldn't convince them otherwise, he wasn't leaving that room. The room seemed to shrink around Miles. The walls, the shadows, the stale air. Everything closed in, pressing against him with suffocating weight. The gloved man's hand tightened on his shoulder, not yet violent, but undeniably possessive, as if he were already claiming custody of him. Miles forced himself to speak. I didn't do anything, he whispered. His voice trembled, not from guilt, but from sheer disbelief that his quiet life had spiraled into this abyss. That, the tall man said, is exactly what a trained asset would say. Miles shook his head, desperate. I clean floors. I empty trash. I don't even know what that device is. And yet you found it, the tall man replied. His eyes narrowed. Conveniently? I was working, Miles insisted. It was in the hallway. Anyone could have dropped it. The man stepped closer. But only you picked it up. Miles felt the gloved agent shift behind him. He realized then that he was standing on a razor's edge. One misstep, one wrong word, and they would decide he was compromised. During the Cold War, suspicion itself was enough to destroy someone. Innocence was irrelevant. Perception was everything. He forced himself to breathe. Look, he said quietly, you're right about one thing. Someone has been inside this building. Someone who knows your operations. Someone who moved through those rooms before I could find anything. The men listened. And whoever it is, Miles continued, they're not stupid. They wouldn't leave a device in the open, not unless something went wrong. The tall man's expression flickered just for a moment. Then the gloved agent removed his hand from Miles's shoulder. Not out of trust, out of consideration. Mr. Carter, the tall man said, until we can confirm your story, you are to remain silent about everything you've seen, to everyone. Miles nodded weakly. And we will be watching you. Miles didn't doubt it for a moment. The men left as quietly as they had arrived. No threats, no reassurances, only a void of uncertainty so profound it made the room feel colder. When Miles finally stepped outside into the early morning air, the first hints of dawn were cutting through the sky, thin pale streaks like cracks in a darkened world. He walked home slowly, each step heavy with the realization that his life could no longer return to what it had been. He was no longer invisible, no longer unremarkable, no longer safely tucked away in the quiet corners of life. He had been witnessed, measured, suspected, and somewhere, maybe in the school, maybe across town, maybe across an ocean, the real traitor was still moving undetected, watching carefully as the investigation tightened. Perhaps they had seen Miles interrogated. Perhaps they were already shifting their plans. Perhaps they had always been closer than he imagined. Miles unlocked his apartment door and paused. On the floor lay a small slip of paper, slid under the threshold. 4 numbers were written on it. 3, 6, 2, 7. The same sequence from the cylinder. But beneath it, a message. You're looking in the wrong direction. Miles stood frozen in the doorway. Because the note didn't just prove someone had been inside his home again. It proved they knew everything. And that the game he had stumbled into was only beginning.